Hi all, I hope you're doing well and welcome to day 2 of the Global Film Funding and Distribution Conference. First things first, it would be fantastic if you guys could give me a quick thumbs up in the comments if you can hear me okay, if you can see me okay, just to make sure that everything is working. We are going to have another full-on day today. We're going to have 4 different talks. First 2 will be by Justin Giddings, where we will be discussing both how to book meetings with decision makers, and you'll see that this can be applied to a variety of different scenarios, both in your film funding and your film distribution journey. Justin will then do a talk on film festival mastery and how to get your films into film festivals. We're then going to move into a talk with Iain Harvey on really funding films for animations, but it's going to have a lot of crossovers and overlaps in your journey as, perhaps just doing live action feature film funding as well. And then finally, we are going to have a talk with Ari Gold, who is a director who won a student Oscar, as well as many, many other awards, on how to stay flexible and agile within the ever-changing industry that is filmmaking. So we're going to start off with the first talk. So I'd love to introduce Justin Giddings. Justin, I'm going to add you to the stage now.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Great to have you here. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and run the first talk.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. I love coming here. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Giddings, and I'm really super excited to be here. I wonder how many people have been to one of these events before. I'd love to know that in the chat, just because some of you guys might hear some of this information that I've done before. But regardless, I got some new stuff today, some stuff that ZB and I came up with that I don't think we've done this yet. So I'm really excited to be here. It's going to be more conversational. I'm going to kind of talk at you for a bit. I've got notes and that kind of stuff. And I want to break down some strategies around the 2 topics that I'm going to be talking about. And then we'll have some Q&A for both. That way we can really get to the specifics of what you guys actually need out of this rather than just what I think you should know. Put those 2 things together, we should have a nice little recipe for awesomeness and success. So so I'll do a quick introduction. So again, my name is Justin Giddings. I am a filmmaker as well as the founder of a company called Greenlight Yourself, which is very much focused on sort of empowering filmmakers by partnering up with people in the industry who have a really great track record in whatever field that it is that they do, so that when I go out and do educational stuff, the information that's getting out there is tested and proven by the top people, rather than, I got into film festival once, let me tell you how I did it, that kind of stuff, right? So I got started in the industry really young as an actor, actually. So I did voiceover work as a little kid. I would take all my money and I'd go buy Star Wars cards and toys, and now I have boxes in my basement that have made me nothing. So the investment didn't pan out on that front, but creatively I kept going. Went to college for acting, went to a conservatory. I'm not a well-rounded student. Moved down to Los Angeles, and I worked pretty steadily for about 12 years out there in LA. I had little moments here and there in things, but I always describe my career as I got insurance from SAG every year, but I wasn't ever famous. I had one little window of being a series regular on a television show, and I've done a bunch of guest star stuff, but there was a moment where I could walk in a grocery store and every once in a while someone would be like, oh my gosh. And funnily enough, it was that show that really led to me creating Greenlight Yourself. So I was on that show. It was one of the first web series that got picked up to be a television show. It had 70 million views. Lionsgate comes along. We develop it into a show. We have our 2nd season, and then it gets canceled. And I'm like, what? So I turned to my co-star. I was like, dude, we got to start making our own content. Why are we waiting for permission to be creative? So we started writing, and we wrote these 2 shorts. Cool, awesome, these are great. How are we going to pay for these? And this is 2012. And I'm like, what if we do crowdfunding? So we did, and we ended up raising about $100,000 for these 2 short films. And that's really where things started to change for me. So I first off did less and less acting and started doing more and more filmmaking. I've got a feature coming out this year with Alfred Molina, and I've had multiple shorts with like millions of views and distribution. I won Slam Dance's screenplay competition a couple years ago. So like I'm a real filmmaker. I'm in the trenches. I'm making movies. I just got hired to develop a horror film. So like I'm out there with you guys. Like my fingers on the pulse of the industry because I'm working in it. The other thing that happened was people started reaching out for help with their funding campaigns. And what started out as like coffee sessions with friends or something turned into now it's been about 11 years of me, the guy who was Kickstarter guy. I'm not going to even be getting into law. He's got and, you know, after helping him turn 50 I realized
Hey, Justin, sorry to interrupt. The internet connection is a little spotty at the moment. Everyone is saying. So, can you hear me and can you see me okay?
If you guys can hear me, yeah, I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm.
Yeah, it's I think it's a little bit better now,
Okay.
actually. Most of the time we can hear you okay. The
Okay.
video is lagging a little bit. So let's
Yeah, I
let's
think as I was before we got on, I was telling ZB that we have this like massive thunderstorm that's happening. So I mean, I've got fiber internet but like the lights have been flashing and stuff. So it might be that I've got issues there. So should we just continue?
Yeah, let's
how it goes?
continue. Let's see how it goes. What we can also potentially try is if it does keep happening to just have your audio on.
Okay.
Perhaps won't be the best thing, but let's try that out. But yeah, for now, let's keep going and let's just monitor it from there.
Right. Okay, cool. So we'll dive. Yeah, just hop in if I need to go to audio only. I've got the fancy mics. And yeah, we'll go from there. Cool. So long story short, these two paths happened where after really sort of greenlighting myself, that's what led to me wanting to create a company that helped other makers. We are creative and it's really hard to make with sound business principles. Okay, I'm seeing more audio stuff
Yes.
coming in. So shall I switch to audio?
Yeah. If you can turn off your video, or I can. There we go. Perfect. I will.
Or it seems to work better when you're around. Oh, how's that, everybody? Is that working?
Yeah, I think it is. It is definitely better. Better now. So perhaps try. Yeah, let's try it out now. Sorry, it is still just at the moment we can't quite understand what you're saying. Nope. we can't hear you at the moment at all. Okay, Justin has just logged off. Trying to come back on. Yep, yeah, Justin, if you can try restarting your computer, let's try that, and maybe that will work better as well. Cool, awesome. So we will see you on in just a minute. Cool. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, as Justin mentioned, he's in the middle of a really, really bad thunderstorm at the moment. So it is, yeah, his internet is going to not be great. So let's just wait for a minute or so until he restarts his computer, and hopefully we can go from there. In the meantime, by the way, I also just wanted to share again, quite a few of you guys already bought the film funding course that we mentioned yesterday. We will, as promised, there's going to be a couple of you that will have won the Lifetime CineCircle Pro membership. We will be sending you email if you did win that. We will be sending you an email with that later today. So you will receive it by the end of the day today if you won that. If you guys are interested in checking out that course, there is still a link below this video on YouTube right now as well. So we will, yeah, you guys can feel free to check that out. And in the meantime, I am going to... we got a question, is it still too late to sign up for the lifetime membership? What I'll actually do is I'll give you guys until, yeah, for the next 3 hours, up until 8 p.m. today. So if you still get the course up until 8 p.m. London time today, you will still be eligible to win that Lifetime Pro membership, and we'll announce the winners at 9 p.m. But in the meantime, I am going to stop rambling over here, and yeah, we'll just have a quick break, and then Justin should be on in the next minute or two, and then we will continue with that talk. And in the meantime, yeah, again, sorry about this, guys. Once again, yeah, we'll take a quick break. And if you guys do want to, by the way, claim your 30-day free trial for CineCircle Pro, you can do that in the meantime while we wait. But yeah, Justin should be on in literally about a minute or two. All right. Fingers crossed, Justin. I see you back. It seems all relatively clear for now. All right.
Guess we'll find out.
Let's do this. All right. All you.
Yeah, I'm physically plugged in, everybody. I do this professionally, and this is the first time. I think it's just this thunderstorm. But I'm hardwired into my internet. I have 600 megs down. We should be good now. So let's see. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Okay. How do I sound? Let's see in the comments how it's going. All good now. Okay, sweet. Awesome. Then let's rock and roll. All right. I'm not going to talk about me anymore. I don't give a shit about me. I give a shit about helping you guys. So let's get into that, shall we? Okay. So, what this first talk is about is it's called decision maker meetings. It is how to find and make meetings with decision makers. So these are investors, these are agents, talent reps, producers, distributors. All of you guys here, particularly, with this being a film financing event, like people invest in people that they know and like and trust. And so finding and developing relationships with people in the industry is really the main thing, the key thing. Everybody always sort of glibly says, oh, it's who you know. And that can be really, really frustrating, especially if you don't know anybody. It is both true and not true. What is not true about it is the fact that you have to somehow be known or be a celebrity, or that nepotism is always going to win out. What is true about it is that this is an industry entirely built on relationships. If you don't have relationships with people, you're not going to be able to progress in your career. So that's what this first talk is about, is how do you develop those relationships with integrity, with authenticity, that are long-term, right? So I'm going to go over 3 strategies for you guys. The first strategy is the number one overlooked tool that is actually going to help you find and connect and book meetings with these people. This is a thing that for many filmmakers, I say, they're like, huh? And then I'm going to break it down so it actually makes sense, right? Second thing is how you cannot screw up this meeting, waste their time, waste your time, come off as unprofessional, and so forth, right? And then the final thing is why it's not really going to be about impressing gatekeepers or having a ton of connections already, or having a long resume full of experience and projects and awards and all that kind of stuff. All right, so it looks like the power in my main house has gone off. So I'm going to stop my cam real quick because there's going to be sound that happens. Hold on. Okay. I was getting alarms about the power, and but I'm in my separate studio, so that should be good now. Okay, I'm back. All right, let's dive into this very first strategy. Okay, what is this tool that I'm talking about that is going to help you do all these magical things? All right, so in the past, the way that people would generally develop these relationships is networking. I hate networking. I hate it. 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 It's the worst, right? Where it feels like, a lot of work that nets you nothing. You would go to these events, you would go to meetups, you would go to festivals or workshops, and you would just kind of mingle, and you would get a crap ton of business cards, and rarely would those business cards lead to anything, or would you even do any follow-up. The people that you're talking to are all kind of random. You don't really know who's doing what, and so you get into conversations and you realize, like, oh, this person's not even on the same page. And frankly, a lot of times they're all kind of at the same level, so nobody's really like leveling up from this networking event. You're just kind of meeting people in the same space. So it's a lot of time, a lot of energy for all of us introverts out there. There's a lot of like social energy expenditure that's also just really challenging. And so we just like will make things and hope it gets big. And that was the way that people would kind of go, right? They'd go to parties and events and all this kind of stuff. And like, let me know if it's different in the comments, but for most of us, the feedback has been that this is not really an effective way to build long-term strategic relationships with people who can actually meaningfully move forward, your career or the project that you're working on. So what's the alternative? What do you do then if like everybody says, oh, you got to network and you got to know people, but that avenue isn't very fun? What can you do? It's this tool. So believe it or not, there's kind of this like magical thing out there that already exists where industry executives are hanging out literally for the sole purpose of connecting to other film professionals, to other, content creators, to filmmakers. They're already out there. It's already happening. So what is this tool? LinkedIn. LinkedIn. Now, when I first heard this and started working with my partner, I was like, LinkedIn? I thought LinkedIn was like where like salespeople went to get jobs for other salespeople or something like this. And that was definitely a thing. But what it has, like 10 years ago, what it has transformed into is, I wouldn't even say a social media network, right? Like we get on Facebook, some of us, I don't anymore, but we get on these social media networks and it's just vitriol and clickbait, and it's kind of a hellscape. There's reasons to be on there and utilize it, but it's not really like we're not like developing long-term professional relationships on these platforms. What LinkedIn has really done a great job is taken a lot of the technology of social media platform, really maintained a focus on it being a professional networking platform where professionals can get on and use the platform to network with other people in the field. And it is now expanded out of that space. So for those of you who might be a little bit older, millennials like me or something like that, you remember a time when Facebook wasn't too bad and you could like engage and interact with people. LinkedIn's kind of like that. Facebook 10 years ago with a professional focus that is now outside of, salespeople, what it kind of used to be. There are literally thousands of film investors, producers, showrunners, talent, agents, managers, they're all on there. Many of them are on there, even the very, very, very big ones. And I'll talk about how to take some of these techniques that I'm going to talk about and use them on other platforms. But if you're not on as a filmmaker, you are the steps on how to utilize this. And very, very effective. Who hire you
Hey, Justin, just coming on for once more because it's breaking up again. Should we maybe try just with your audio just to see if it possibly improves things?
This is where you are going to really sell your resume, your experience, your passion, the things that drive you. Okay.
Hey, Justin, can you hear me? Okay. Let's.
Hello.
Oh, you're back now. Okay.
Now. Oh my gosh, we've never had this. I mean, I've done this like 3 times with you. And it's always been here.
We've never had these issues. Yeah.
I don't know. I checked my speed test. I've got 600 megs down and 20 megs up, and and I'm wired in.
I think let's maybe try it without the video.
Without visual. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Let's try that for a few minutes and see how that goes. And let's go from there.
I've created some like codes and stuff that people can use to get access to some of this other stuff too. So if we have issues, we'll fix it. Okay, cool. How is that? Is that any better?
Yeah, it sounds good right now. I think it just goes through patchy periods and let's try it out with this.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, let's keep going, shall we? So going back just a little bit in case it cut out. Profile. You need your profile. Think of it like a pitch deck. So that's the first step. Show yourself as authentically as you can. And in the Q&A, we can get into more details if we want to. Second thing is engagement. So step 1 is your profile. Step 2 is engagement. Post meaningful content. And then strategically engage with the thought leaders and the decision makers that you are wanting to develop relationships with, right? You reach far more people than other platforms, and you can have meaningful conversations with these people. So if there is a producer who is making a post about, a process that their film is going through, let's say, hey, we just completed post. You can go to that post and you can say, that's really awesome. What was the toughest part? Or I'm so excited to see, like, it doesn't even like I'm going to get into this big conversation by asking thoughtful questions. You can literally just say, that's really awesome. you have to realize that on their end, they're probably most of these people only going to get a couple comments. And if you meaningfully engage with their content, it creates name recognition. It's called a parasocial relationship. It's very easy to build. Sorry, so this is how we're laying a foundation for a full relationship. Out of the gate, if you're authentically responding to people's content, they will begin to notice, especially on LinkedIn, where unlike Instagram, where you have a handle or something. It's your name. It's your profile. If they were to click on it, they would see you presenting yourself as the filmmaker that you are. So you can also then put out content that shows that you have an opinion and a point of view that you have. You can start to articulate yourself as a creative in your profile while you're going out and engaging the people to develop relationships. You can go out and engage on their profiles. So the next two steps are search and then tools. So
Hey,
search.
Justin, really sorry to interrupt again. And there, yeah, Justin just dropped out. Yeah, really sorry about that, guys. I think Justin is in the middle of a really, really bad storm at the moment. Yeah. So I think what we'll do is we'll also give you guys some links to resources, perhaps that you guys can look at specifically for for this talk as well as the next talk that Justin was doing. In the meantime, Iain, I see that you're backstage as well. Can you give me a quick thumbs up if you're okay to actually jump in for the next talk that we have scheduled? If you're okay to do it now. Iain, can you hear me okay? Iain, can you hear me okay? Can you give me a quick thumbs up if you're okay to actually start your talk now? Sorry guys, give us 2 seconds over here. Iain, can you hear me in the back? In the back room, yes? Are you let me add you to the screen because maybe perhaps you can't hear me okay. Okay, Iain, I'm going to add you to the stage if you're okay with that. Hello, Iain. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay, Iain? Maybe not. Okay, guys, sorry about that. Give us 1 second. Hi all. Once again, yeah, big apologies for all the technical issues today, and thank you to everyone for sticking around. We are going to get moving on to the next talk, where we're going to be talking about different funding strategies and in general business strategies for animation specifically. And throughout the talk, we'll also find out what the similarities and differences are between animations, live action films. I'm sure that this will be very insightful for everyone who is really interested in animation, and also that there might be some overlaps and great pieces of knowledge for people who are also, not currently trying to do animation, but perhaps are interested in exploring it, or can get some insights out of it as well. So I am going to add our next speaker to the stage. Great. Iain, can you hear me okay? Can you see me
yes,
okay?
hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you, which is just everything that we can hope for now.
I apologize about the gloomy light, but because of the change of times, I've had to sort of go to another room.
No problem at all. It's very cinematic.
True.
Okay. Guys, can you just give us a quick thumbs up in the comments if you can hear both of us okay and see both of us okay, just to make sure that everything is working before we dive straight in. There is a slight delay, but I'm going to assume that everything is working okay. Yes, we're getting thumbs up. Fantastic. So for starters, could you just give us a brief introduction of yourself? Let us know a little bit about your previous experience, your history in the industry, as well as what you currently do.
Yes, well, I started life as a boring chartered accountant, but one thing led to another, and I ended up in publishing. And the publishing, because we published a lot of children's books, I became involved in animation. My first experience was as exec producer on The Snowman, Raymond Briggs' The Snowman, back in the early 80s for Channel 4. And after that production, and then When the Wind Blows, the feature film, I set up in the early 90s, 1993 to be exact, Illuminated Films as a production studio for animation. I do specialize only in animation because one of the first things I learned is that it's difficult to cross over too many territories unless you're a genius. And I don't rate myself as a genius, unfortunately. I made sure one tip, the obvious tip, is try and have a definite winner when you start your company. Easily said, not so easily done, but because of my animation connections, I was very lucky to be able to produce a series based on Eric Carle's The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which just happens to be one of the best-selling books ever for children. And of course, it was an ideal way to start the production and get my company known internationally. Since then, we've produced animation shorts. One award-winning one was Transit with Pete Kroon, the Dutch director who worked 20 years in America. And then a feature film called Christmas Carol, the movie. And then some TV series like Little Princess for Channel 5, The Rubbish World of Dave Spud for ITV with Johnny Vegas and Jane Horrocks, amongst other fun actors. I also love doing, obviously based on my experience of The Snowman, what we call half-hour animated specials, which we effectively treat like a feature film, but obviously with reduced budget and not hopefully so many overheads. So I exec produced Father Christmas by Ray Briggs, and then I went on to produce the Sprint Cinders and War Game, which won many awards, On Angel Wings, based on Michael Pergo's book, and then most recently a band named Wojciech, which is co-pro with Poland, and it's based on a true story that, if I'm honest, I didn't believe at first, but it turned out to be very much true. And we ended up making, I hope, what people will see is a wonderful film.
Mm. And can I ask, what was it that that attracted you to animation specifically? Why animation? I mean, I understand why you couldn't do everything, both animation, live action, and so on. But why was it specifically animation that you wanted to get into?
Uh, I suppose, if I'm completely honest, it wasn't. But what I did want to be when I was young was a writer, because that sounded like an easy job. You'd just sit at home, have a coffee or two, and turn out masterpieces. But I soon realised that was not realistic. Working in publishing, I worked for the Penguin Group for 10 years, nearly 10 years, and seeing all the wonderful picture books, I just realised that the art form is magical. There's so many possibilities. Uh, Also, once we got into production of whatever I was first involved in, the magic of an artist being able to move a character through their drawings, it was just it just seemed to me something very special. The line piece of the line on a piece of paper, and the way that was animated just intrigued me, and there's no way I could do it, but it gave me the thrill of trying to see how many more we could do by finding other projects, which is what led from one thing to another.
Hmm.
I'd have loved to have done live action in some ways because it's quite frustrating animation because it's very slow, but I've been busy enough to forget the frustrations.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm sure there are frustrations on both live action as well as animation side.
Of course,
But indeed, the pace of the work is definitely one. So I'd love to dive into the business side of this, and specifically, the funding side, and perhaps to start off, I mean, could you tell us a little bit about some of the differences? And I know this is going to be a pretty broad question, but some of the differences between funding an animation and funding a live action film. What are some of those key differences there?
I think most specifically is the development side. For anybody to become interested in an animated feature, not only do you have to have a script, but you have to have artwork that shows how you would intend to portray the story. Of course, you have to have ideas in live action of how the visuals will look, but if you have excuse me, a war film uh, set in in France, you don't need too much reference material to indicate what you're doing there. Or if it's a picture sync drama, again, the live action side is fairly straightforward. Of course, wonderful live action movies that work just beyond shooting what you see on the page is the key to the brilliance of some of the directors. Uh, I might have to just get a glass of water, but for instance, I just saw an Indian film recently, which has just been released, All We Imagine as Light, which is just about three women in Mumbai. But the way the director shoots that is just so clear cut from the storyline. Now, in animation, where I have an Indian project, I would have to get artists that can reflect so many elements, the backgrounds, the characters, and all that would have to be designed and done before anybody would really want to move me on to financing the movie or the TV series or whatever.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. And can let's maybe dive into the different specific funding routes that there are when it comes to animation. And let's keep it quite broad in the first sense. When you're funding your animation, again, where do the funds come from? And then we'll break each one apart and talk about it in a little bit more detail. But generally speaking, when you're funding your animations, where does the funding come from?
Well, there's a pre-Brexit and a post-Brexit answer to that. Pre-Brexit, and I don't know how many people listening are outside England or Britain, but when we were part of the European, the common market, as I think of it, European Union, we had media, and media had about $200 million a year or euros a year to distribute, and animation and live action got good shares of it. So for instance, you could go to apply to media for funding for development. Live action would be basically just apply for script and maybe some research material, location research, etc. In animation, which is expensive to develop, and we were getting grants of 70,000 euros or more, not only for a script, which was, at this stage was relatively inexpensive. I mean, relative, I'm talking about, but the artwork, because it's all risk as it's scripting, but obviously we have no idea what design we necessarily want initially, unless it's based on a picture book, and even then you have to adapt. So we had good development funding, and then one could. So we're talking about the order of up to 100,000. That's all gone. Let's forget the fantasy of what we used to have. And so if you're in the UK, you have very few areas to go in animation. The BFI or Screen Scotland are all possibilities. You obviously prepare a presentation and apply accordingly. But we're talking about far lesser sums of money that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are people that know better than me how to get more, but sadly, my experience is that you have to really take a lot of risk yourself. And this is where I'm very lucky with a studio that has been going 30 years. We have resources and we have a hit list of productions that still generates a little income for us, which allows me to speculate on new projects. When you actually get to the stage of, we have to divide between TV and film. Film is purely speculative. You obviously approaching the studios or there's a sales agent, but the sales agents won't really get committed until they have a pretty good idea where the film is going to go. The studios, yes, they can back projects. I've got very close with Warner's on one production, but then the last minute they just didn't want to proceed. My Christmas Carol movie was financed out of Germany, tax revenues there. It is speculative. TV for animation is also difficult, but I don't want to put people off. What I'm trying to say is that you cannot expect from a UK broadcaster more than 20 to 25% on a commission. That's a commission. They might, on a pre-buy, they would pay less. We are, in both live action and animation, got tax reliefs on the UK spend. And obviously, most countries have the similar tax relief. But that's at the stage where you've got you into production, so that doesn't help you in the development phase. After that, in animation, you have, if it's particularly for children, you're hoping to get licensing and merchandising income. And therefore, you might get investors that see the long-term viability of the project. Something like the Snowman still generating income for Penguin, Father Christmas for Illuminated. That is the sort of what one hopes. I mean, obviously the Aardman films and Wallace and Gromit and other films similar to that, Bluey, etc. Australian series. That is where you get investors, but they have to be convinced upfront, because everything is a risk. I think 1 in 20 animated series are likely to get any real significant licensing merchandising income, and that's probably being optimistic. So you always, the odds are tough, but of course that's what we all, we don't go into this game or business of producing just for out of self-belief in what we're trying to achieve. Sometimes you're let down, sometimes the actual production doesn't work in the way you'd hoped, but I've been lucky. On feature films, again, when you're talking about European productions, they don't tend to generate licensing and merchandising income, even if unless it's a popular character already successful from TV. What happens in Europe is there's a wonderful collaboration between broadcasters and the CNC in France and other backers. Like in Norway, there's a very big film fund. So most animated movies made in Europe, and I'm probably going to be shot down for this, don't expect to make their money back. It's not realistic. Unless I'm not talking about studios that make films based for Hollywood. You know, the Minions, for instance, I think is based out of Paris, but that's again a major franchise backed by American support, and that is completely different from what you might call the more art, creatively driven European animated films.
I think it's so interesting talking about merchandising, and it's something that I actually think even filmmakers who are doing live action films probably don't consider enough, because having these different cross media IP strategies in a sense can really de-risk your investors, right? Because you don't need to make all your money back just from the film, but you can do some sort of merchandising, licensing, and so on. Of course, it might be sometimes easier in a sense with specific animations. How do you go about creating your characters, your stories, and so on to make them sort of more likely to pick up in merchandising a licensing deal?
The easiest way is starting with a picture book that has been published and therefore gives you a very good idea of what you expect the final visuals to be. It's then easier to also do the presentations, and depending upon the sales record of the book, you might well get investors attracted to it. But I think you're very unlikely to get too much up front to aid the production. There's basically usually a gap of 30% is my experience, which you have to somehow take the risk on, or defer your fees, and the production overhead you're allowed of 10% or thereabouts, and use those funds for the gap till the TV series or possibly the film is broadcast, and then of course you hopefully things kick in. I mean, if I start with the first production I had, I'd be quite honest, I knew absolutely nothing about how you would finance or rather recoup on a film. We had sold The Snowman to Channel 4 as our first Christmas, and we had put the rest of the money in as a risk investment. I put money in from the publishing house I worked for. And we had no idea how we get it back. We just believed it strongly in what the end product looked like, the product film. And then, of course, it just took off. Our timing could not have been more perfect. I can't claim any act of genius or foresight. It just happened to be just before video took off. All these things have gone now, and it's obviously 80% of children's animation is seen via YouTube. So it's a completely different way of looking at and trying to finance these things. It's not. I'm sounding negative, but I'm not, because I'm still trying to produce. I've got 2 series I'm trying to get off the ground. An animated special I've just done, which we try to get recognized, shortlisted for the Oscars, and 2 feature films that I'm trying to raise finance on. So you just don't give up. That's the first and only lesson I can say. Never give up. If you do the comments you get on, the reactions you get to it, and don't keep continuing to beat a dead horse. But the frustrating thing actually with a lot of broadcasters and financiers is, let me think about it, and you have to then keep knocking on doors and keep chasing.
Yeah, I definitely think resilience is something that every single filmmaker, creative definitely needs to have, because you'll always need to go for a million different no's to get to a yes, and we will most likely experience more no's in a week than most people do in their lifetime. I'd love to go back to I'd love to go back to the way that you work with, already created content. So, for example, picture books, and turn them into animations, just to give everyone an idea of how does a deal like that look like. So, you go to a publishing company, a book publishing company that has a picture book. Is this something where you pay them an upfront fee, or a percentage of of the revenue from the movie, or can you just give us an insight into how that deal looks like for any filmmakers who might be looking to, for example, use some content that already has a pre-existing audience and readership into their films, just to see how that deal looks like?
Well, this is where live action and animation are exactly the same, at least in my imagination. I mean, maybe you have a script that you start with, but many productions, many would-be productions start with a book or similar, picture book, and you option the rights. And it may be the publisher that controls the rights, but usually nowadays agents, agents of authors and creators, often on to the fact that the publisher will just take a cut. Thank you very much for no effort. So you're normally ending up dealing with an agent, which is actually good news because they're professional. I can be critical of some publishers, even though I used to work for publishing. I used to think we were brilliant at publishers about being efficient, and then I realized how that was just from my illusory position. You option the rights, so it's not necessarily a big figure. When I'm doing animation, because I know it's going to take at least 2 years to get anything practical for presentation purposes, you've got to get a script. I mean, even if it's a 10-minute series, 10 minutes per episode, that script will take 3 to 6 months to get right, and it's going to be reworked and reworked, and you have a script editor, etc. So then you've got to, at the same time, do some concept artwork, even if it's based on a picture book. Take an illustration from a picture book and adapt it into animation is not as straightforward as it may first seem. And I'm not an artist, so at first I thought, well, that's easy, just copy that. But I soon learned that how wrong I was. And just in passing, one of the big problems is if you're working with a very high-end illustrator that could be giving you beautiful artwork, animation doesn't want to misquote you here, but beautiful artwork. It needs practical movement. So any one frame of a piece of animated film may not look as beautiful as a piece of artwork that the artist has spent weeks on making perfect. In animation, you're dealing with movement, and therefore it's a different end result. Yes. So optioning is I would always option for at least a minimum of 2 years. I think in live action, sometimes it's as little as 6 months to get the first script, but I would certainly not suggest to anybody, even in live action, to do less than a year. Do less than 2 years, you've got the clock beating against you all the time, because time does pass rather quickly. The option, just to take one, the option is renewable for usually another year. Then you pay a second fee. So initially the only commitment you're making to the publisher or the author creators is the option fee.
Okay, and that option fee is like a flat fee, right? Just like this figure.
Initially, yes, but what it's up again, what you do, the option fee is against the final acquisition fee, which will be based on the final budget, or that's a negotiable. Could be from anything from 10,000 or 5,000 if it's not very well known, to hundreds of thousands. I paid $100,000 for one set of rights that I got, that I negotiated for, and frankly, that's small change in Europe. In America, that's just. There'll be option fees for just 100,000. It's a different level. But I've been lucky to, spot things early and get the rights at a degree and at a level that doesn't, as it were, cheat the creatives, but also allows us to actually have a chance of getting it made, because it's all very well selling options. I mean, if you're looking from the Asian's point of view, and nothing happens, they want to see it happening because that's their chance of seeing much more for their clients.
Yeah. So from a practical sort of process point of view, for a filmmaker that would like to do this, you essentially first pay a flat fee to the publishing company, which is just for the rights.
Or the agent.
Or the agent, sure. Which is just for essentially your development process, right?
Correct.
To get it up to a place where you've got a budget and you're going to turn it into a film. At that point, you then have another set of negotiations of how much you're going to pay them based on the budget and so on, for giving you, the right to use those characters and story for the film itself.
Correct. Yes.
Is that right?
And obviously, besides the option fee, you've got to have the money for the development. And with my company, Illuminated, because I've been going for 30 years, people will know that I'm not just going to pay an option and just sit on it. I try to get going as fast as possible. But you hit walls many times. Oh, I thought it was going to work like that. It's going to be 10-minute episode, or is it 7-minute episode, or it's a feature film, or there's all sorts of things that hit you unexpectedly. But that's where, as a producer, you've got to be flexible and listen to. I mean, obviously, one of the first people I'll be working with, besides the script writers, is the director or possible director, and so immediately becoming a team, and you're building up a team and team ethos, and ideally you're working with the creatives. Again, when you're negotiating an option and a contract of acquisition, because of course the option dictates all the terms. Should you move to the acquisition stage of the deal, because you don't want to keep that open, because if it suddenly all goes well, you don't really suddenly have to renegotiate for the rights. So the option is also option and acquisition. And ideally you work with the creatives. And I always make very clear to them, we will try and follow what they want, their vision, but ultimately, as producer and director, we have to have the final say. It's the only way to really, it's not because we are better than them, it's just because we're trying to do it for the market that we perceive is what we're aiming for.
Yeah. And I can imagine that this must be very, very difficult to find investors for, because it's quite risky, especially for just the development side, right? Because you're optioning, the rights to that book. You're going for the whole development process, and then once that's all done, then you're trying to figure out whether you'll actually be able to raise the rest of the funding for the full film. So this is a huge risk for a potential investor. How do you navigate that in your conversations with them?
Well, we better get the violins out, because I mean, as a studio, we have to take a lot of the risk. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, Brexit, pre-Brexit and post-Brexit, we used to be able to approach media with a detailed application. It was a very incisive, detailed form where you filled in all the relevant elements, and that I know a lot of people disliked because it seemed complicated and time-consuming, and it was probably a month's work. But it answered a lot of the creative questions that you would have to address anyway. So in some ways, it was a very good discipline. And of course, you have to look at any application form now to the BFI or Screen Scotland or other regional bodies, Northern Ireland, Wales, as well as obviously in Europe. But Europe has media still, as a sort of pre-checklist of what you're wanting to do with the project. You might see something brilliant you love, you want to get it straight away, but you need to go through that sort of self-discipline of how do we want to progress this. And a lot of application forms will ask those sort of questions in broad terms, not specific. And it's a very good checklist for the producer.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And how do you, we always try to, in these talks, really talk about the types of films that are more marketable, that have, that where we can see that there is market demand for this type of a project. Because I think there's too many filmmakers out there who make certain types of films where there is really high competition, not a huge amount of demand, and because of that, they are from day one making a film where they're going to be struggling to either find the funding, or if they even do find the funding, to somehow manage to make a return on their investors' money. So I'm just wondering, when you're picking new projects, how do you go about that? How do you go about finding a project where you think, okay, either this type of book I think is going to do well because of the readership, or if it's not based on a book, how do you go about creating a type of project where you feel like, what, this will have legs, this will be marketable once we get it done?
It's instinct or stubbornness. You can look at it either way. I could take two examples. Little Princess. I mean, I'm talking about animated TV series here. Sorry, hang on.
No problem at all. No worries.
Sorry, I just got my because of course we changed the time. Talking about animated series, I can give two examples. Little Princess, which was based on a series of picture books by Tony Ross, were well established, known throughout Europe, known throughout North America, as well, English-speaking world, and therefore everybody, broadcasters all around the world, were interested straight away. And I had, proven track record with the author and the sales. Contrast that with the Rubbish World of Dave Spud, an idea out of the crazy mind of my director, Ed Foster, that was based on some experiences of his as a child, in terms of how he observed life. And the Rubbish World of Dave Spud is about a family in a tower block in Grimsby, had absolutely no publishing history. It's never, nobody knew of its existence before. So there I had to keep knocking on doors till somebody found the humor. And BBC saw immediately the designs were very strong and strikingly individual. And that was besides the humor of the script, the most important element. So good design. We had no, it was an idea out of the director's head, so there was no previous artwork to work with. But ultimately, the BBC were interested. I couldn't raise the finance quickly enough, so they had to move on, as is their right. And at the third time of presentation, ITV took it on, and then they ended up doing over 100 episodes for ITV. So that goes back to being stubborn and persistent. I got back to the broadcast at the right time for them when they had a gap in their production plans. And in terms of investors, I had to find an international distributor, and ended up with Beta Film in Germany. And I did some pre-sales, and that allowed us, along with the animation tax relief and the ITV fee, to just about break even on the production.
Interesting. And can you tell us a little bit more about, if you are looking to work with a broadcaster, how that process looks like from start to finish? So is it you coming up with a project, pitching it to the broadcasters, the broadcasters then commissioning the entire thing, or is it more speaking to the broadcasters, seeing what they're looking for and creating a pitch based on that? How do you navigate that if you're looking for funding from broadcasters?
Well, both the BBC and Channel 5, and I'm sure others around do give seminars or presentations on what they're looking for, and it does vary from every 2 years or so. Their priorities change. 1 minute it's 5-minute series, the next minute 7 minutes, the next minute, etc., etc. But you can often find on their website as well what their priorities are, and that is the first place you start. But at the same time, I'm sort of trying to find something that's, I mean, I suppose one of the problems for Illuminators is we don't have a house style. Everything we try and do is a bit different, and that's just a question of our tastes and what we're trying to do, which is a range of productions. And I like to, because of my publishing background, where the publishing house I work for published 100 picture books a year, so I was sort of always aware of the range. And obviously broadcasters, I mean, I think there's probably about 10 new productions in the UK a year at the most. Channel 5, BBC, ITV, fewer and fewer. They're mostly buy-ins now, sadly. Uh, so it's working with the broadcaster is listening to what they've said on their seminars, attending markets, because they're often kind enough to give presentations of what they're looking for or what they're working with, and then submitting a proposal. And more, it seems you don't want to be too far forward in the development, because especially with the BBC, they would like to get involved in shaping what you're wanting to do.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about how the proposal looks like, specifically for broadcasters? What's included in the proposal? What are the key elements?
It's just a presentation deck. This is same for live action. I'm sure you have, an introduction, a synopsis, a broader spectrum of what you're looking for, who it's targeting. For animation, obviously, you have artwork, designs, concept artwork, and some treatments, maybe a few lines for script ideas, or even the full script. I always tend to like to get a full script, just so I can see how. Usually we need the comedy for animation. I mean, I'm always looking for. I don't tend to do shoot 'em up type, space sagas or that. I'm nothing wrong. I'm just not. I've never got excited enough, because when you're working on a TV series, you're reading treatments, you're reading scripts, you're listening to the voice recordings, you're putting the storyboard together, you're getting the animatic. If you don't find the script entertaining, you soon get bored. And my tastes are more to comedy and what you might call human interest stories, without wishing to sound pompous. I tend to be more interested in realistic scenarios, even if it's a fantasy world like Little Prince is, which is a family set in a castle where the king and queen or the mum and dad. I mean, it's just an analogy. It's just real. It's just a reflection of home life, but dressed up as a king and queen, etc. So it's probably 10 pages is sufficient. You could argue sometimes less. Broadcasters, I mean, I've known even commissions where the broadcaster, and this is going back some time, I worked, an American broadcaster hadn't even read. They just thought it was a hot idea, so they bought it, and they were horrified by some of the elements that we delivered, even though it was all in the script, all in the detail, all in the background. And actually, they had to pay us to change some of the things for their use only, not in the UK. So it's extraordinary how sometimes there's little interplay between the producer and the broadcaster. Other times, obviously, as a professional, as a commissioner of the BBC, they will work hand in hand with you. Working with ITV was less strenuous, because ITV and BBC is sort of the national broadcaster. It has a very unique position and has to be very careful about protecting its role in British society, and there's no other way of putting it. ITV is a commercial organisation, has more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. To what extent, though, do relationships matter when it comes to pitching to broadcasters? Do they tend to go for the same production companies that they've already worked with in the past? Is it always, pitching that's open to everyone? And if it does matter, how have you gone about trying to build relationships with broadcasters to try and get, win more and more pitches in the future?
Relationships do matter. But that doesn't mean that I get, through the door or preferential treatment, or Armin or other studios. They don't get preferential treatment. They just have ideas that keep, because of their skills, attract the broadcasters. I didn't know anybody at ITV before. Well, I knew of them and I met them, but before we got the commission on Dave Spud, it was new relationships. And then anyway, the broadcasters change every 2 or 3 years. They all got careers which work differently from producers' careers or producers' hopes. They're all obviously looking to develop what they're doing in their life, and so you build up a very good relationship with one commissioning editor, and then they move on. So I don't think there's any preferential treatment. Obviously, it does help if you have a good track record. I mean, it'd be foolish to say otherwise. But there's been plenty of examples of productions that for producers that have started off afresh. I mean, the obvious, most recent clear-cut example, and is Peppa Pig, which was based around a brilliant director's talent, but they suddenly went from doing specialist short films for Channel 4 to trying to do a commercial series. And it took them, I think, 5 years from the initial presentation to broadcasters to get enough funding to make it could happen. And then after that, it became a commercial phenomenon, unlike any other one recently in this country. I mean, obviously we had Paddington Bear most recently, but that's on the feature film side.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, 5 years. Yeah, it's a long time.
But they don't give up. I mean, and they were doing development, so they weren't just sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for the phone to ring. You have to keep. I mean, that's why a producer has more than one project.
Yeah.
A director tends to be appointed to do one thing, and they then focus 100% on that, or they should be. One of the joys of being a producer is that I have a juggling act to try and keep a few balls in the air, and hopefully some of them landing in the right place.
Yeah. I also wanted to get your thoughts on, in your experience working with broadcasters or investors for that matter, or when you're licensing actually different IP from pre-existing work. Are there, do there tend to be a lot of disagreements on the creative vision where you need to balance your own creative visions with that partner's expectations of what you're going to do? Does that happen quite often, or usually is the vision quite well set out in the beginning, and that sort of deviates any kind of issues?
Well, the vision should be set out clearly at the beginning, but then things change. So I've been lucky. As a producer, as a production studio, never to have really had a major problem. Sometimes we've had to shift the angle of the production, the series. There's one that I'm in development on now where we've moved it from what might be called bridge age group, that's sort of 4 to 7, to preschool, because the broadcaster that has interest in it changed their thinking about that, or partly because they changed personnel. So, but that's we'd always felt we could be flexible. So the producer has to be flexible, but there has to be also a place where you draw the line and say, look, I don't want to work on this in that way, and it might mean you no longer get the commission. But for British, you pretty well establish a relationship if you get to that stage of commissioning, and finalizing the finance plan, to know everybody knows exactly what you're trying to do, and then there are always script comments. I mean, if you're working with Disney or one of the Americans, sometimes the comments on the script are longer than the script, and you've got to go through them and address them and be professional about it. It can be I suppose you could say frustrating or irritating, putting it politely. But that's, they are, that you've agreed to work with them, and you have to devise ways to make sure that they're satisfied and that they get what they think they commissioned, and hopefully not lose your vision for the program or the film.
Yeah.
Feature film in animation has the storyboarding process, which is then with perhaps a rough voice track first made into an animatic, and those that can change throughout the development process before you go into full production. It's not completely understood in Europe just how much work the American studios put into working and reworking the animatic, because ultimately a good animatic is a film on the cheap, and therefore you can see how well it's going to work or not.
Yeah. Interesting. I also want to discuss a little bit marketing and distribution, which I guess, if you're working with broadcasters, it might be a little bit different. But for the films that you've done, I mean, first of all, some of them have won really prestigious film festivals. I want to understand a little bit more about how, whether the fact that they've won those awards was really purely down to the quality of the film, or was it a mixture of the quality of the film and sort of PR and marketing that you were doing to try and get into the right festivals, to lobby it at those festivals, and so on? Some of your films that have won the most prestigious film festival awards, were you working with PR teams for those films, or?
No, I mean, it's basically has changed in 20 compared to say 20-25 years ago, and this is a sort of subject. I mean, whatever age you're in this game, in this producing world, you're learning. You have to always learn. The films that won, illuminated films that won awards like War Game and Transit are purely to do with the quality of the director's vision and the end result. We did no marketing. Both Transit and War Game got to the stage of being shortlisted, not nominated for the Oscars, and we didn't do anything other than ensure it qualified. Maybe that was a mistake, but 25 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. On the film that we're now looking to try and get recognition at the Academy, a bear named Wojciech, we have a PR company, and we're advertising and marketing it, and paying for screenings in New York and LA. And it's a different. It's just, we didn't do that before, but that's what's necessary now because it's so competitive, and the Academy is so such a prestigious award. Obviously, you can't just sort of not make the effort, but it costs. Funding I didn't expect to have to pay, because I'll be quite honest, I had no experience of this before we'd made this current production, and then I started learning fast just how much more we had to back the production compared to old days. That's just a reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
On feature films marketing, because you asked about marketing, the distribution company, not the sales company, the distribution company in your individual territories will be doing the marketing. And again, one of the big shocks I had when we started working on Christmas Carol, which we had an amazing cast of, with Kate Winslet, Simon Callow, Nicolas Cage, etc. I was looking forward to day by day managing the production. We had a studio of 70, 80 people plus outside workers. And I couldn't believe how much time, because Pafe was professional, were taking up of mine in terms of the marketing plans and the just how we would handle that. And of course, that's crucial for a producer. You want your production that you're spending 2 years actually making, let alone 2 years developing, to work. So Pathé were making all sorts of reasonable demands on, what about this, what about that, and you have to sort of try and give your judgment of things as the film progresses, as the production progresses.
And with other features that you've worked on, how did you go about finding your sales agents or distributors for the film? Were you going to different film markets, or was it mainly kind of, by emailing them, or how did you go about finding them?
Me personally, I used to make sure I went to the markets, Berlin and Cannes in particular. I often had nothing really to sell or raise their interest in, but animation is, was particularly a small percentage of the overall market until, I suppose, this century. There was the occasional successful animated film, and then Pixar and others came along and exploded the success of and the market share of animation. I think it's as much as 20-25% on the feature film market worldwide, whereas it was probably in last century no more than 10%. Obviously we had the occasional Disney successes, but that was, one a year. Now there's, the Academy Award, the Academy only has now about 30-40 entries for the feature film, if not more, a year. Before they were lucky to scrape to 10. And of course, there's a lot of now much more individual films. I say individual, it's always a team, but not the obvious commercial big studio productions out of Europe particularly. And I mentioned earlier how so many of the financing possibilities in Europe are willing to back animated features, mostly through Cartoon Movie, which is held every year in Toulouse, and there would-be producers could go and present it to would-be financiers and distributors and sales agents.
This is honestly this has been a very insightful talk into this world of animation, and actually got me excited to maybe explore that even more. So
don't bore the audience too much.
No, and I actually think there were a lot of overlaps in terms of live action films as well. Specifically talking about licensing, merchandising. I think this is something that filmmakers should really exploit a lot more, both on the live action side as well as animation, because again, it can de-risk investors, it can help you get funding. So it was really interesting to hear you talk about that.
I would qualify about licensing. You don't usually get much upfront unless it's an obviously, very commercial property, or of course a sequel. Then we're talking about different. But I'm obviously, I think most of the audience be wanting to get their first one off the ground. Peppa Pig would have had no licensing, merchandising income or investment attracted to it. It would have been purely broadcast and maybe sales agent and risk investors. Is only when it took off. But the licensing income then became the dominant aspect of the exploitation of that series. Giving all due credit to the creatives, they kept their vision. They didn't allow it to be warped too much.
Yeah. Do you have any final words of wisdom for people who are perhaps early on in their careers and they're considering going into animation, or are right now thinking really between animation and live action? Any final words for them on helping them make that decision?
Depends upon the type of person. If you're a writer, you can theoretically go for any live action, all that. It's just a question of your creative mind, what interests and excites you. Artists, you could be an artist, do concept art for live action or animation. I wouldn't. It's not something that you can predetermine by advising somebody. It's a question about what that individual wants out of their skill set. I'm very, very conscious that for a would-be producer, it seems such a tough world. It seems to be fewer and fewer opportunities, and there are fewer and fewer. I mean, there is a relative recession at the moment. The streamers gave everybody hope 5, 7, 10 years ago, and of course they're cutting back, and they're now much more specific on their targeting. What I would say to you is, if you believe in what you're doing, and you've got to have somebody to buy your bread, as it were, you've got to keep going. You've got to keep trying. But I can't wave a magic wand, and I can't suddenly say it will happen. Especially having left media in the UK, I feel very angry that nobody really understood just how much the opportunities for new producers have declined. There's always doors to open, and go to markets and for animation's Annecy, where everybody that's at Annecy will give you a chance if you persistent enough to give you some advice. You've got to be thick-skinned, used to a lot of rejections. Boy, if I counted up the no's I had, there'd be no room in my counting house. All I can offer is there are opportunities, and it's the individual brilliance of something, maybe a team of people doing it or an individual, that will win out. But it's impossible to predict that in advance.
Yeah, I definitely think it's always encouraging, actually, and I hope that filmmakers are encouraged when we say that everyone hears a lot of no's, because that normalizes it a little bit. I think when you're quite early on in the industry and you hear a lot of no's, you're thinking it's you, rather than no, that's just what happens to quite literally every single person there. And I think the successful people, or the non-successful people, see sort of failure as every single opportunity. They really see it as a potential for failure, and the successful people see opportunities in every single failure that they have. And I think that difference there is really what sets apart the people who end up doing well, and people who don't. I want to just say a massive thank you for coming on, and for speaking to us today, and for sharing all of your knowledge and all of your wisdom from the many years that you've had in the industry. I hope that everyone else also found this talk as useful and as insightful as me. But yeah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming on.
No, my pleasure. And I just wish everybody who is still listening every good luck, and also don't give up.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. And for everyone else, so we're gonna continue with the theme of persevering even when things are going wrong, such as today with some of our technical issues. So what as you guys know, the first two talks that we're going to have on booking decision maker meetings, as well as film festival strategies, we couldn't do, as they were both with Justin, who is still currently in the middle of quite a bad storm. So he's not going to be able to make it back today. What he has told me is that he will send me links to both of those talks that he was going to do. He will send me the links to them so that you guys can view them in your own time. So most likely tomorrow you will receive an email with those links, so that you can actually continue to, you can view both of those talks and you won't miss out on those. Now, we've also reached out to Ari Gold, who's our next speaker. Unfortunately, he's not able to shift his talk which was meant to start at 8 p.m. London time. So for that reason, we are going to take a little bit of a break right now, which is actually going to have to be a 1-hour break. And we are going to be back at 8 p.m. London time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern and at noon Pacific time. So apologies, guys, for this break that we're going to have to take. But I would highly recommend that everyone comes back at 8 p.m. GMT. We're going to have a talk with Ari Gold, who has won a student Oscar film, who had his films screened at Sundance multiple times, who has won South by Southwest multiple times, and he's going to be discussing exactly how you can stay flexible within an ever-changing industry. So I hope that you all come back. It's going to be happening right here on the same link, so you can even just keep it open. And at 8 p.m., we're going to be starting in the next talk. So feel free to put an alarm clock on or anything else. And we're also, we'll be back on at 8 p.m. I hope that you guys found the last talk useful, and we will see you all in a little bit over an hour. Hi all, welcome back. I hope that you all had a nice break and are ready for the final talk of the day. Just because we've had some issues with technology, could you guys once again give me a quick thumbs up in the comments just to make sure that you can hear me okay, that you can see me okay, and just to make sure that everything is working technically? That would be fantastic. So in this final talk, we will be having a discussion with Ari Gold, the filmmaker with some fantastic, credits and awards behind him, and I'm sure he'll bring us some fantastic insights over here as well. So Ari, I'm going to add you to the stage now.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us.
Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic.
I just got back to California, so it's, that's what it looks like outside. I guess some of you are. I was just in London. So yeah, how do you want to do this?
So let's start off by why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where your filmmaking journey started, and how you got to where you are now.
Well, I grew up in San Francisco. My father was a writer, so I started writing short stories at a young age, imitating him to some degree. And then eventually realized I liked dealing with people more than sitting behind a typewriter. So I started making short films in college, and then afterwards the films started doing well, getting into Sundance and places, Telluride, places like that. And so out of the success of those shorts, I was able to start raising money for features as well. One of my shorts won the Student Oscar, and then that became leverage to cast bigger actors on my first feature, and then the actors became the leverage to raise money. I'm not sure the people listening how much they know about that whole process, so I can kind of get into that piece by piece. But yeah, so I made 2 fiction features, and I'm now in post-production on my 3rd and 4th features at the same time. So that's exciting.
Great, and I think there's so many different directions that I'd love to take this talk. That we'd be here for hours. But I'd really like to focus it as much as possible on how filmmakers can really deal with the ever-changing state of the industry. I think really every decade there's been so many changes. But I think, particularly in the last few years, I see so many changes with the kind of content that, that filmmakers are advised to make, what budgets they're advised to work with, or what budgets they should pitch to different investors, how they should pitch to investors, the role of, streamers coming in, places like Amazon suddenly opening doors to indie filmmakers, then closing them back down just as soon as filmmakers start to get used to that. So I think, broadly speaking, I'm going to start off with a very general question, which is, how have you managed to stay flexible throughout your career so that when industry changed and, and when requirements changed, both from either investors, distributors, you managed to adapt to that?
I mean, it's a constant process. There's no, one morning is different than the afternoon that follows. So staying flexible, a lot of that is psychological, in the sense that it's easy to see the change. If the changes that are happening don't benefit you directly, then it's easy to say like, oh, the world is against me. Why does nobody want action movies this month? I just wrote an action movie, so you can take everything personally. What I have done recently is really diversify myself. So I'm developing 2 documentaries, an action movie, a drama, a horror movie. There's a few others, actually. Sometimes I can't even keep them straight, but I have a bunch of things that I'm developing simultaneously. and some of them are larger budget projects that I need to cast a big actor or get a big producer behind it to fund it. And then one of the projects that's in post-production now was something that I made in the streets with no permits and almost no budget, fully improvised feature film shot in the streets of San Francisco. So, having the flexibility to shift your creative mind is really important, because there's this project called Fogtown here. I have a hat for it. I've been trying to get this thing made for many years. It's a really cool action adventure set in like a favela in Brazil. I went actually down to Brazil to do a test. Had a great time shooting in a favela. I have a comic book for it, a zine. You can go to fogtown.com and check it out. But it's a big project. Even if I shoot it super indie style, which maybe I'll end up doing, it's at least a couple $1 million, and it could be budgeted at 50 million if it were shot Hollywood style. So I would be going crazy if that was the only thing I was trying to do, is find some studio to back that. I do have a great meeting actually on Monday with a studio about this project, and that's cool, but it's taking years literally to get these important meetings set up. And so in the meantime, go off and make a movie improvised in the streets of San Francisco for no budget. So that's how I've been responding to the challenges of the businesses, by just doing a lot of things and different levels of things.
Yeah. I want to ask you two follow-up questions.
I took a class from Werner Herzog, and one of his catchphrases that I think is worth sharing is "do the doable." So he kept saying that, "do the doable," and what he means by it is a lot of times people look at the obstacles that they have for their projects, and that becomes the excuse for them to never do things. And his point is like, always look for what you can do and then make that happen.
Yeah, and I think a great example of this was COVID, when suddenly films came out that were shot entirely over Zoom that have actually done really, really well commercially. So it's definitely always interesting to figure out what you can do as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
On that point, there's two things that I wanted to ask you. The first one is, you seem to have you're working on multiple different projects at the same time in development. That, when I mention that to filmmakers, I always see, especially first-time filmmakers, they are so overwhelmed by the idea of making one film that if they had to think of 6, 7, 8 different films that they were trying to move forward in terms of development at the same time, that would quite frankly overwhelm them so much that I'm not sure they'd be able to figure out how to do that, especially if they're all different genres, some documentaries, some features, some higher budget, some lower budget. Mm-hmm. How do you personally manage that so that you can actually switch from one to the other? I mean, do you find...
I don't know if I totally do manage it. I do my best to manage it, but I have one of the things that is sort of a simple thing that I've done is I have a back page on my website that just has a list of the projects, because I forget sometimes. I mean, it's crazy when I think about how much work goes into a project. I might sometimes just forget about one of them, even though I'm, put hundreds of hours into it. Someone will say, "Oh, what are you working on?" And it just slips my mind. So having that list, me like, "Oh, right, there are these projects," and then also writing down very clearly what I'm looking for with each of them. So it's like, the one I'm in post-production on, I'm looking for post-production financing. That's pretty simple. Then there's a drama I've written that would be great to have like a 40-year-old woman star in. So for that one, I know that in order to get that made, I need to get someone who has clout, who's, anywhere between 35 and 50, woman, ideally with her own production company, because I think this would be a great vehicle for someone who's like, "Oh, I want to I want to get my Oscar-winning role, and this is a script that's. So I write down under that one, like, what is the main thing I need next for this thing? You know, in this case, it's a, you know, actress with a production company with clout. Now, obviously, when I'm deeply in the weeds on a film, whether it's shooting or editing, you know, that's all I'm thinking about. I'm really on one project. But if I'm editing and I'm editing a certain number of hours a day, I know that there comes a point when the brain is just making garbage because you're staring at the same thing too much. Yeah. So setting aside time where it's like, okay, if I'm spending, let's say, 4 hours a day editing this one thing, if I spend 8 hours, I'm probably not going to get twice as much work done if it's the same project. But if I spend 4 hours and then I go work on a script that I'm working on, or do some phone calls, producing phone calls, trying to advance one of these other things, then when I come back to the 4 hours of editing on the thing I'm intensely working on, I come back more kind of open-minded and refreshed. But yeah, it's some days it feels insane, and I'm like, oh, I should just have one thing. But you know,
and I'm wondering on that note, whether you have some sort of a system that you can share with us on how you juggle both all the different projects, as well as, say, you know, producing type tasks versus creative tasks, such as, you know, writing, and again, producing tasks such as calling potential investors or whatever it might be. I mean, do you find that you try to kind of block out, again, just like a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there? Do you mix and match? Do you work on a project for a week and then another project or a week, or is it just whatever happens that particular day?
Whatever happens that day, because so some days are completely red with meetings. You know, I have a Zoom with London or with someone in Berlin, or, you know, different time zones. And some days get filled up with those meetings, and then I find that I forget to do the creative work because I'm like, oh, I'm accomplishing all these things with all these meetings. And then I get to the end, I'm like, what did I do today? I just talked with people. Like, when are we going to actually make something? So it's good to, I mean, I think it would be smart if I did more kind of time blocking in advance, where I'll look at the week. And, you know, one of the things that I think I forget to do is, if the week fills up with, if my calendar fills up red, you know, whatever, my calendar is red. So like, if I see a bunch of red everywhere, I should be looking at the gaps between the reds and marking out time where it's like, work on this script, you know, because I have to be my own boss about those creative things, because otherwise I'll just go for lunch or go for a walk. I mean, it's good to go for a lunch and go for a walk, but it's really good when I make a calendar for my own creative work as well, which I often forget to do.
Yeah, I mean, I find personally that it's important to listen to your own mind and to your own body throughout the day. So sometimes I'm actually not a fan of over scheduling things, because if you wake up and you're feeling very creative, you should write, you know, and even if you schedule down that you're going to work on a budget, it's not the right time. On the other hand, there's sometimes when you will sit down and you will have told yourself, I'm going to write, and you stare at that blank piece of paper and go, nope, not today. And that's okay as well. So yeah, so I do think it's important to stay flexible in that sense.
Yeah.
I also, you know, one thing that you mentioned over here, I mean, you know, you've worked on a few films. You're now, you know, looking to do some films with, you know, much higher budgets. A lot of filmmakers who are in the position that you are would feel that now grabbing a camera and shooting something with a zero budget would almost be like, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's like taking a step backwards. You know, that I need to always work on higher and higher budgets and bigger films.
Yeah.
What is your sort of mentality towards that?
Well, maybe this is the Werner Herzog thing again, but do the doable. But I mean, Herzog talked about this. He kind of mocked some of the people who came up with him some of the famous filmmakers that he, was friends with or had worked with or was competitors with. He mocked a lot of the people of his generation for saying, "Oh, I can't get the budget for my movie. I've been trying to make my movie for years." And his point is like, well, change your budget then. So I think that's a wise approach, because ultimately, like, I'd rather be out in the streets making a movie for no money than in a Zoom call. There's a kind of pleasure in the process of trying to get a big project off the ground, but if I can make something in the streets, it's great. And I'm so glad, the film that I'm going to be mixing next week, I'm so glad that I went out in the streets to make this thing, because I could have easily just kept hustling all these projects. I'd still have the 7 or 8 projects, but now I have the 7 or 8 projects that I'm hustling, and I have some good meetings coming up, but I also have another feature film under my belt, and, yes, there's no stars in it, and I've done stuff with stars, and this doesn't have any name actors, but I got to make another movie. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we want to do. Right?
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to ask you, as we're talking about an ever-changing industry, I was going to ask how you think the industry has changed in the last couple of years, but instead what I wanted to ask you is about right now and a little bit, ahead into the future. What do you think the big challenges are right now, and where do you think the opportunities are for independent filmmakers, who are looking to make, for example, lower budget films at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of industry Zoom call that I'm on every couple of weeks where people talk about the changing business and try to get a sense of where things are going. One of the hopeful things, looking for hopeful things, but one of the things that has been revealed through some research is that there is apparently a much bigger market for independent films than is being capitalized on. So the question that some of these industry insiders have been asking on these, on these calls is like, all right, we see that there's a lot of people out there want to see these movies, but they're not seeing the movies. So there's something's going on where the people who would actually pay to watch or stream or even go to the cinema to see something aren't doing it, and somehow the films that should be getting to those people aren't being made aware of. So there's a disconnect in distribution for sure. I don't know what the answer is on it, because obviously the streamers have taken over, and the streamers can sneeze on a movie and suddenly it gets popped into the front of the algorithm, and other movies get thrown onto Amazon Prime or Netflix and vanish in 3 hours later. They're at the bottom of the algorithm and no one will ever find them again. So sorry, I keep getting a buzzing. I don't know how to stop my phone from buzzing. I apologize. But obviously the process of making movies has gotten a lot cheaper. All the tools, you can shoot a good movie with your phone. You can cut on your computer and, clean up all the audio with AI. And, there's a lot of things that wouldn't have been possible a couple years ago, but then how to get that in front of eyeballs that's the big question. And I don't know what the answer is. I know my personal taste is that I think movie theaters are great if they are events. I don't mean events like Transformers movies as events, which has been kind of like the way the industry has treated the cinema experience in the last couple of years. It's like, oh, well, people will pay for a movie if it's an expensive movie with a lot of explosions. My feeling is that people will pay to see a movie if the theater is a fun experience. If they're serving, hamburgers and beer, if the lobby has pinball machines and it's kind of fun, if the people running the theater have a sense of curation where they're showing maybe some new releases and then some cool old movies that no one's heard of that they should have heard of. So there's a, I'm in Los Angeles now. There's a few theaters like this. Tarantino has 2 theaters, and then the American Cinematheque has 3, I think, theaters, and then there may be a few others, but certainly in like Paris and London, there's a lot more of this where there are local theaters that come up with their own programming, and what that means is that people can go to the movies without knowing what's playing and just know that they're going to have a good experience, which I don't think people have when they walk into like a multiplex, because those multiplexes that were all like built in the 90s or whatever, to me, it feels like being in an airport. Like I don't want to be in an airport when I'm in an airport. And I certainly don't want to be in an airport when I'm trying to go experience a movie. It's like the wall-to-wall carpet and it's purple and there's like stains on the floor and they're serving the same greasy popcorn. And I just don't think it's sexy. As an evening, you can spend an evening, you can watch a movie at home. Like, well, why won't people go to the theaters? I think it's on the theaters to make it fun, make it like, and there are places here that are really doing a great job of that.
Yeah, and I'm also a big kind of advocate of these more like experiential type, cinema experiences. One which is actually a story of how a producer adapted to COVID was that his film was being released around the time when we had a lot of restrictions here within the UK. And he actually he went from town to town and created his own drive-in theater, basically. They just bought a giant inflatable screen, had some kind of portable toilets, things like that. But aside from that, it was just a drive-in theater that he created. And that got so much PR and buzz that it actually helped his film commercially. And I think that's that's a kind of fantastic way to take a negative, which was COVID and the fact that people couldn't go in the cinemas, and turn it into a positive. Another one that I've recently heard of, which I think would be a fantastic experience, was, I believe it was actually somewhere in San Francisco, by a pier somewhere. They were screening Jaws, but you were essentially sitting on these little inflatable boats in the, right by the pier in the sea in the middle of the night, where you couldn't see what was underneath you in the water is splashing around you and you're watching Jaws. And I was thinking, what a great experience that was. That must have been, figuring out a creative way to do that. So I think, in terms of that, I also wanted to ask a follow-up question on the fact that you think there is actually more of a demand for independent films than what there should be. I'm wondering what made people think that there is more of a demand.
What I don't, I wasn't the person running the research, unfortunately. Yeah. There were, like data people who came in with this research. I don't know how they got it. I have questionnaires, probably, talking to people about their viewing habits and their what they're looking for. I definitely think your experience of like watching Jaws on floating boat, that's exactly the kind of thing that I think is. I don't know if that works at scale, right? Like, how do you do that for like a nationwide release? I don't know. I've had great experience showing my movies in one-off experiences, like some of my movie that I'm like my first feature that I made a long time ago. I showed it all over Europe and I was doing like one-off screenings and they'd be packed and people having a great time. It's a comedy about air drummers. So I'd, bring in some music and like do a little air drum competition at the end. And, I made each one an event. But, how does every movie do that? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely a challenge for sure, and can be expensive. And also as filmmakers, you finish the film, you kind of want to move on to the next film rather than thinking about setting all of that up.
unfortunately, you can't just make a film and then like,
yeah, wouldn't that be great?
you know, you have to have in your mind that the process of getting it out is going to be as intense as
I think,
making.
yeah. I think what's interesting as well, Netflix recently said that, now pacing of a film is actually more important than having a star cast in this sort of digital era that we live in, which could be another reason why actually independent films could be doing better and better, because as long as you get that pacing right, people will sit for a film on Netflix that doesn't have any known actors. But they most likely wouldn't have gone all the way to the cinema to do that.
Right.
I actually, on that note of cast, I wanted to ask you a question, a bit unrelated to everything that we were talking about. But when it comes to film funding, I like to ask pretty much every single person this question, so that we can start to get a little bit closer and closer to some sort of answer. Biggest sort of catch-22 in the industry. You need the money to get the actors, and you sort of need the actors to get the money.
I wish I had
any even little bits of insight on how you navigate that.
I'm to a big actor, a huge actor right now. I have sent my book to his management company. I've asked everyone I know. I was in London. There's somebody who's an art dealer who like helped this famous person buy some paintings. I'm like trying every which way to get to the actor without going through the agent or manager, not because I want to cut out the agent or manager, but because the agent or manager in general these days, they're looking at a project and they're saying, is this real? They're saying, and by is this real, they're saying, okay, is it financed? Who's behind it? What casting director is attached to it? I mean, I've talked to a couple of casting directors now who won't even get involved in a project unless you can show them the paperwork showing that you have money in the bank to pay the actors, because they don't want to put their reputations on the line and call some, up and coming or even famous actors and say, oh, there's this great project. That actor and that team doesn't want to waste their time if there's not money in the bank to pay them already. And then, of course, the investors who would be putting the money in the bank are like, well, I'm not going to do that until you have the actor. So this chicken and egg thing there's no secret sauce around it. It is really annoying. It's really annoying. And it's gotten more annoying, actually, even just in the last like 3 years, because there's a certain roster of actors who get movies financed. In other words, the sales agent, foreign sales agents will basically like say, okay, what's the genre? Who's in it? That plus that equals this budget is possible. And that roster has gotten shorter. So those actors have they have just mountains of scripts being sent to them. And the first process of vetting is which ones already have money, because they don't want to waste their time, reading something and then say, okay, we love it. When are we shooting? It's like, okay, well, now we're going to go finish raising the money. Now that you give us an LOI, it's a letter of intent. So I wish if I had an easy answer, I would happily share it, but I'm trying to figure this out myself.
And is that something that you figured out in your previous films, perhaps, that you can share a story of how you got to that?
Things have gotten more intense. So with the previous films, I had some of the money already seeded before I went out to cast. And getting the closing financing wasn't contingent on the cast, although I wanted to get as big names as I could. But apparently now it's gotten just a lot more aggressive in terms of how that works. I mean, literally in the last 2 or 3 years, according to the people that I talk to, particularly the casting directors I talk to. The casting directors are like, I know you can't get money without this short list of people, these essential people. And I know that these people won't read it unless they see the money. So good luck. Figure it out. I'll be back when you have the money in the bank, and then we will go out to cast.
Great.
So that's such an insane catch-22 that's why I'm like, all right, how can I get my project through the back door to an actor who might want to do it because they think it's cool, and that's the dream. And would advise on that, the key to getting name cast to do stuff on indie films is to give them a part that they have not played before. That's like one of the key mistakes that I see people make a lot in the indie space, is like, if there's some actor they have their eye on because they've done, I'll just say action movies just for the sake, and then they're offering like a low budget action movie to the same action star. It's like, why would the actor do that? Why would they do a low budget version of what they already do? Give them something, if there's somebody who's always played boxers, you give them the part of a teacher. And if there's somebody who's always played teachers, you give them the part of a boxer. That's how you get big cast.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking of the example of Elijah Wood after Lord of the Rings, and he went on to do like every single possible role that's as far away from that role as possible. And he's done some really weird stuff with that.
A friend of mine from film school actually directed one of his first movies after that, where he plays, Allen Ginsberg, discovering himself as a revolutionary young gay poet.
Yeah,
It's very different. Oh no, sorry, that's not Elijah Wood. Sorry, that was Daniel Radcliffe. But the principle holds.
Yeah. I wonder if you have any kind of strategies or stories you can share on figuring out what parts actors would want to play, what like how to find out that actor is actually really wants this type of role.
Read interviews, look up interviews for the person, research the person, find out what they say they're passionate about when they're doing an interview, or if they have a side hustle as a writer or as a poet or as a painter. Find out what they love. If they're famous enough, you can read about them, and then you can kind of intuit what might be interesting to them. And then if you can't really figure it out, then at least just know that the part has to be really different from what they normally do. Because if they normally do, they'll do it again for the big paycheck. Because you're not going to give them a big paycheck. So you got to offer them a piece of your movie, piece of the ownership of your movie, and B, a part that they have never seen before. Sure.
Actually, now that I think about it, since all this information is online, it's probably a relatively easy question to ask ChatGPT. What role would this actor really like to play? Actually, might be a good starting point.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, because I think part of it could be, perhaps some sort of solution could be actually leveraging shorts into, if a short wins a festival, get some exposure to leverage that into then making a feature that actually a known actor would be more interested in attaching themselves to because they really love the concept. I'm wondering, if you can share any stories on how you leveraged your early work.
My short film Helicopter, which is about my mother's death in a helicopter crash, it won the student Oscar, played Sundance and many other festivals, did really well. That film got me some cred to raise money for my first feature, but very specifically right now, I am doing exactly that. That it's quite a different approach, but I'm making a feature film version of Helicopter. It actually includes the short film or part of the short film within the film itself. So I am doing exactly what I've seen other people do and also told people do. I'm like, oh, maybe I should do this. It's super helpful. I'm sending a pitch to, famous actor who I can't say right now, but like I'm including the short film, I'm including a book that I've published that's related, and the credibility of, some random filmmaker like me who's, not famous like the famous person I'm reaching out to. They can now see, okay, this guy, played Sundance and won all these awards, and here's the short film. I could watch it, super helpful. It hasn't yet cracked the nut on this like uber famous person, where it's like the level of protection the person has around them with their management and agent and whatnot is like, this is a mega star. So I have been thinking in terms of that, like, okay, how long do I give myself to try to get one of these superstars to do my little movie? Even though I believe that the pitch is really cool, and I believe that this actor I have in my mind would at least be super curious if he saw it. But I just don't know if I don't know if any of these attempts have actually gotten it in front of him yet. So I'm calling everyone I know, like, does anyone know him personally? Trying to get that, and I made a pitch. Another thing that's really great to do, it's been quite successful. I'll share one of my little secret sauces. When I'm doing pitches to an actor, I videotape myself. So, and that's what I did on my previous movies as well. I get in front of a camera and I say, hey, so-and-so, whoever it is, and I pitch it like I'm sitting across from them at a dinner table. And not long, we're talking like 1 minute, 2 minutes at the most. But that way, if it gets to them through a casting director or agent or a manager or a friend or whatever, they can just be like, check out this link. And then that actor clicks it and they're like sitting on the toilet or whatever. But like they see a person and they see the person say, hey, so-and-so, hey, whatever your name is, I'd love to work with you because XYZ, this is why, and this is why this project is so special and why you would be so great for it. That pitch, doing it on video has really helped.
Well, I can really imagine that. And you know what? I actually want to follow up on that with something that someone once reached out to me. They were basically saying there's this company in the UK, they do something similar to what CineCircle does. And they wanted to just get in touch to see if there was room for collaboration. And he just sent me an email saying, hey, mate, I saw what you do. I've got a quick idea. Check out this Loom video below. And the Loom video, you open it and it's him for 2 minutes just saying, blah, 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 everything that you would normally say in an email. And I was thinking, I now know what you look like, what you sound like. From an email, it's really hard to tell whether this person is serious, whether they're reasonable, whether I'm gonna like this. Whereas when you see this 1.5 minute video, I right away go, oh, okay, you know what? I'll reply to this email. Whereas normally I would have probably never replied to that email. So I think sending, even whether you're speaking to big actors or just like, cold emailing someone, send them a video.
Even I guess a production company could be it. I mean, this is another thing, is like when you reach out to a production company or a management company, or your first audience is the assistant. So addressing it to that person and respecting that they have some hopes and dreams and aspirations, that can be really effective. I mean, I've never done the video for the assistant, but just sort of like brainstorming out. But certainly when I call or email a company, find out the name of the person you're talking to. Don't just say like, oh, can I speak with so-and-so, whatever person you're trying to reach. Get to know that person, find out what they're interested in, because then they can become an ally on your project, and also in a couple of years they may be a huge executive, which is often true. But if you can get the person who picks up the phone and is getting treated like crap all day long, and you can kind of treat them with respect and get them excited, then they might think, oh, this is my opportunity to like help a project get made, and this is actually why I'm doing this, because it's a lot more fun than just saying, please hold, please hold, please hold.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time, but I just wanted to ask you another question, which is, we've had some talks yesterday on finding private investment for film. We've also know that getting the first money is usually the hardest money to find. So I'm wondering whether you have any tips, tricks, or strategies, or any kind of words of wisdom for filmmakers here who are looking to find their first, private investment for their film.
I mean, you've got to open up your whole life, your whole phone, all of your friendships, and just try to find that person who has a little extra money and wants to do something fun with it, and probably lose it all. I mean, for some of those people, it's a tax write-off, especially if you can create a nonprofit so they can give money and then claim it as a tax write-off more quickly than if they have to wait a couple of years to declare it as a loss. So thinking about what the investors, I mean, again, it's sort of like what I was saying about casting a famous actor to play something in a cheap movie. Think about what that person might want. So in terms of the people with money that you might be hitting up, what does this person want? Maybe they want a little more excitement. Maybe they want to go to a film festival. Maybe they want to go to some parties. Maybe they want to see their name in the credits. Maybe they want a tax write-off. How can you make it all something that's appealing to them, and then just be relentless forever trying to get them to come on? I mean, I wish I could see, but it's
every time I talk about crowdfunding, I think I usually lose like 80% of the audience right away, going like, nope, I don't want to do that. That's just feels like begging my friends for money. And I think the more and more I do these talks, the more I realize that really finding private investment is not that much difference to crowdfunding. And in the same way, there is the same mistake that you can do, which is, rather than thinking that you're offering someone some sort of opportunity or value, you think that you're just begging them for some sort of money. And you can reframe that quite easily, right?
So you can't, I mean, no matter what, when trying to get to an actor, like, people have their lives. Like, they don't do stuff because they want to help somebody.
Yeah.
They do stuff because they want to do it. So you have to make them want to do it. The most charity-like thing that happened to me was getting Neil Peart, the drummer of Rush, to be in my movie Adventures of Power, because he was at that point particularly notoriously reclusive, not doing interviews. He hadn't done his movie stuff yet. And the letter that I wrote that made its way to him eventually, he did feel like he wanted to help out an artist trying out, but also he just wanted to have some fun in that case. And I got lucky with him, because his idea of having fun was showing up on set and doing this little part in my movie, and getting to remember what it was like to be an indie, and that's what it was. But even the charity aspect of helping out, another artist, was, I think, less important than, in his case, he just wanted to have a fun day.
Yeah. I remember I did this interview with a producer called R&B Kuntz, and he always really reframed all these things where filmmakers usually feel like they're asking for favors into, no, I'm offering someone opportunity. So when he was, looking at messaging, different journalists, for example, he did this massive Kickstarter campaign. He raised over $1 million for a horror film. And, for example, he was reaching out to Deadline to write and cover the crowdfunding campaign, where most filmmakers would be like, please, please, please. He was saying, this is going to get you guys clicks. I promise you this is why, and so on. This was an opportunity for them. At the same time, just the crowdfunding campaign itself, rather than saying, please guys, support my campaign, he created this whole experience where he was, through that campaign, any backers were going to be put in a Discord channel where they were going to learn how a film with over $1 million budget gets made. He was going to send them updates every single day on how the rest of the funding is going and so on. So rather than asking them to support a crowdfunding campaign, he was giving them an opportunity to be part of an experience where they could get so much for their money. And I think it's really reframing those things from, I'm asking for a favor, to no, I'm offering you a lot of value. That can be game changing.
Yeah, that's essential.
Yeah. So we are running out of time, but first of all, I just want to thank you so much for all the insights that you've given us so far. It's really been fantastic having you, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. Is there any final words of wisdom that you can give to our audience in, how we can make more films happen, more films get funded, and more films?
Wisdom, man. I don't have the wisdom. I mean, I think it's do the doable, like dream big and then do the doable. So, and the other thing, I suppose, maybe one more word, since I've already said that, word of wisdom is that if you're not really obsessively passionate about a project, don't do it. It takes too much out of you. And whenever I've gotten involved in something that I was sort of into, it was just such a time suck. And it's really hard to get a movie made, and it's really hard to get a movie out. And the thing that has kept me going is just feeling so passionate about my projects. And, I get pitched stuff a lot, and then I pitch myself stuff a lot, and then I'll think of an idea like, oh, that would be cool. Or someone will say, hey, do you want to co-write this thing about whatever, name your thing? And I'm like, oh, that does sound like it would be cool. But you got to distinguish between like, oh, yes, that would be cool, and this is something that if I die in 6 months and I've gotten this into production, I will have made my mark in the world. Like making that distinction where it's like, does it have to get made, at least according to your heart and your passion, and do those things and try to say no to all the other stuff that's like, yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
A lot of cool is like, I mean, good, I suppose good stuff can come out of it, but it takes too much out of you.
Yeah. And always assume that the project is going to take 3 times longer than you thought it was going to take, because that's usually going to be the case. I think saying no is such an important thing that most people still don't quite know how to do, and it actually gets harder and harder and harder as your career progresses, because you have to say no to better and bigger opportunities that in the past would have been incredible, but they no longer are because of where you are.
And then to yourself as well. That no is to your own ideas.
Yeah.
Where you smell test an idea to be like, is it a cool idea because it seems like other people will think it's cool? Or is it a cool idea like I can't stop thinking about it because I'm obsessed with it? And do those ones, but not the first.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. Honestly, this has been such an incredible talk.
Contact me if they like, and if they have more questions. And thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, honestly, it's been a wonderful talk. Gotten so much useful information, lots of inspiration as well. So thank you so much for coming on. Hope you have a great rest of your day, whether you're doing calls or writing for the rest of the day.
Okay. Mixing.
Great. Cheers. Thank you. Okay, guys. So we are going to be wrapping up for today. I hope that you all enjoyed this last talk. I honestly found it, yeah, really, really enjoyable. With lots of insights over here. So tomorrow we are going to be focusing very much on marketing and distribution. We are going to have an initial talk with Jack Binder, who's going to be talking about putting together a good budget for your film and how to creatively move the budget around. But aside from that, the rest of the talks will be focused very much on marketing and distribution, talking to a few different distributors, both on how you can market your film if you've got a really, really low budget and you're trying to self-distribute, as well as how to get bigger distributors on board and how to not mess up a deal. So I hope to see you all back tomorrow at the same time as today. Hopefully we'll have no technical issues then, fingers crossed. In the meantime, I just want to share with you guys once more, because there is only 24 hours left if you guys are looking for, to claim your 75% discount on the film funding course. We had just under 40 people get the course, so we've got a little over, I think it's 11 spaces left. So if you guys are interested in it, I'd recommend checking it out. Again, this aims to demystify the entire film funding process, and you do have a money-back guarantee on that as well if you guys don't find it useful. So I'd recommend checking it out. But aside from that, I hope that you guys have a lovely rest of the evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are. And hopefully we will see you tomorrow.